Jessica Winters stared at the plate in front of her, her stomach turning as the smell of expensive truffles and perfectly seared Wagyu beef reached her nose. The dining room fell silent as every pair of eyes watched her, her father's concerned gaze, the chef's nervous expression, and the household staff's curious stares. For the 5th time this week, Jessica pushed away a meal prepared by one of the most celebrated chefs in the country. Her father, William Winters, the tech billionaire known for his patience in business dealings, was quickly losing it with his only daughter. "Jessica, please. Chef Pierre flew in from Paris specifically to cook for you," William said, his voice strained with frustration. Jessica shook her head, her long brown hair falling across her face. "I'm sorry, Dad. I can't eat this." Chef Pierre, with his perfectly pressed white uniform and multiple Michelin stars, looked as if he might faint. No one had ever rejected his food, especially not a 25-year-old heiress with no culinary training. "What exactly is wrong with it?" William asked, trying to keep his tone even. Jessica looked down at her hands. "Nothing is wrong with it. It's just empty. There's no heart in it." William sighed heavily and dismissed the chef with apologies and a generous check. When they were alone, he turned to his daughter. "This can't continue, Jess. You haven't eaten a proper meal in weeks. You've rejected every chef I've brought in, French, Italian, Japanese, Spanish, all the best in the world." Jessica stood up from the long mahogany table, still hungry but unwilling to force herself to eat food that didn't satisfy something deeper than physical hunger. "I know, Dad. I'm sorry. I don't understand it either." The truth was, Jessica hadn't enjoyed food since her mother died 3 years ago. Elizabeth Winters had been the heart of their home, a woman who believed in simple pleasures despite their enormous wealth. She used to cook Sunday dinners herself, refusing help from their staff, saying that food made with love tasted different. Since her passing, Jessica had found herself unable to enjoy meals, especially the elaborate creations made by famous chefs her father hired. William rubbed his temples. "I have a charity gala next month. It's important, Jess. Important people will be there. I need you to be healthy and present." Jessica nodded, guilt washing over her. Her father had thrown himself into work after her mother died, expanding his tech empire even further. The upcoming gala was for a foundation he'd started in Elizabeth's name, funding research for the rare form of cancer that had taken her too soon. "I'll try, Dad. I promise." That night, Jessica couldn't sleep. The hunger gnawed at her stomach, but the thought of calling down for another elaborate meal made her feel worse. Around 2 a.m., she decided to sneak down to the kitchen and find something simple, maybe bread and butter or cereal. The Winters mansion was quiet, the staff quarters separate from the main house. As Jessica padded barefoot down the grand staircase, she noticed a light coming from the kitchen and heard soft humming. Curious, she approached cautiously. Through the partially open door, she saw a woman she didn't recognize. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, with beautiful dark skin and hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore simple clothes, not a chef's uniform or the staff uniform, and was stirring something on the stove that smelled incredible. Jessica's stomach growled loudly, giving away her presence. The woman turned, surprised but not alarmed. "Oh, I'm sorry if I woke you," the woman said, her voice warm and melodic. "You didn't," Jessica replied, drawn into the kitchen by the enticing aroma. "Who are you? I don't think we've met." The woman smiled, lines crinkling around her kind eyes. "I'm Rose Johnson. I started today as the new head of housekeeping. The staff told me you haven't been eating well, so I thought I'd make something for when hunger finally caught up with you." Jessica approached the stove, peering into the pot. "What is it?" "Just a simple chicken soup. My grandmother's recipe. Nothing fancy, I'm afraid." The smell was making Jessica's mouth water in a way it hadn't in years. "May I try some?" Rose looked pleased. "Of course, honey. Sit down." Jessica sat at the kitchen island while Rose ladled some soup into a bowl and placed it in front of her with a piece of crusty bread on the side. With the first spoonful, Jessica felt something unlock inside her. The soup was rich and comforting, the chicken tender, the vegetables perfectly cooked, the broth seasoned just right. It tasted like home, like safety, like her mother's Sunday dinners. Before she knew it, tears were streaming down her face and the bowl was empty. Rose didn't ask why she was crying. She simply refilled the bowl and sat quietly across from her, a gentle presence as Jessica ate her first full meal in weeks. "Thank you," Jessica whispered when she finally finished. "That was the best thing I've eaten in years." Rose smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Food should feed more than just the body, child. Some things can't be taught in fancy culinary schools." As Jessica headed back to her room, her stomach full and her heart lighter than it had been in a long time, she couldn't help but wonder about Rose Johnson, the new housekeeper who cooked with the same kind of love her mother once had. William Winters noticed the change in his daughter immediately. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and her clothes no longer hung quite so loosely on her frame. When he asked about the transformation, Jessica simply said she'd found something that agreed with her. What she didn't tell him was that for the past 2 weeks, she'd been sneaking down to the kitchen late at night, where Rose would have a different homemade dish waiting. They would sit together, Jessica eating while Rose shared stories about her life, growing up in a small town in Louisiana, raising her son as a single mother, working her way up through various households until she landed the prestigious position in the Winters mansion. Why housekeeping? Jessica asked one night over a plate of the most tender fried chicken she'd ever tasted. You're clearly an amazing cook. Rose chuckled, wiping her hands on her apron. Cooking is love, not work. I never wanted it to become something I had to do. This way I keep the joy in it. Jessica thought about that a lot, how so many things in her privileged life had been about achievement rather than joy. She'd gone to the best schools, joined the right clubs, earned the right degrees, all to prepare for eventually taking over her father's company. But when had she last done something purely because it brought her happiness? One morning, William was surprised to find Jessica already in the dining room for breakfast, something that hadn't happened in months. Dad, I have a strange request, she said as he sat down with his coffee and newspaper. William raised an eyebrow. After the parade of rejected world-class chefs, I doubt anything would qualify as strange anymore. Jessica took a deep breath. I want Rose to cook for us. Rose? The new head of housekeeping. Yes. I've been eating her food for the past 2 weeks. It's the only thing that tastes right to me. William studied his daughter's face. So that's why you're looking healthier. Jessica nodded eagerly. Her food is amazing, Dad. Not fancy or pretentious, just real. Please, can we try it? Just for family meals? William considered this. Finding something his daughter would eat regularly was worth any unorthodox arrangement. I suppose we could give it a try. But what about her housekeeping duties? She can train someone else to take over. Please, Dad. I think Mom would have loved her cooking too. At the mention of Elizabeth, William's expression softened. All right. I'll speak with her today. Rose was surprised by the offer and initially reluctant. Mr. Winters, I'm honored, but I'm not a professional chef, she explained when William called her to his office. My daughter hasn't eaten properly in 3 years since her mother died, William said bluntly. Whatever you're making, it's working. I'll double your salary and you can hire and train your replacement for the housekeeping position. Rose considered this. I'd need to use fresh ingredients, shop for them myself. No prepackaged fancy stuff. William smiled for the first time in their conversation. Whatever you need. Just please help my daughter. That evening, Rose served her first official family dinner. Roasted chicken with herbs, mashed potatoes, fresh green beans and homemade rolls. Simple food beautifully prepared. Jessica ate with genuine pleasure, and William found himself taking second helpings, something he rarely did. This is excellent, Rose, he admitted, surprised. Rose nodded in acknowledgement, but her eyes were on Jessica, who was eating with an enthusiasm that made her heart swell. There was something special about this girl, a loneliness that reminded Rose of herself at that age, despite their vastly different circumstances. As the weeks passed, Rose became an integral part of the Winters household. She took over the kitchen completely, planning meals, shopping at local markets, and filling the house with delicious aromas that had been absent for too long. The staff noticed the change in the atmosphere. The house felt like a home again. Jessica began spending more time in the kitchen watching Rose cook, sometimes helping with simple tasks. There was something therapeutic about the rhythmic chopping of vegetables, the patient stirring of sauces, the careful measuring of spices. My mother used to cook, Jessica confessed one afternoon as they prepared dinner together. Sunday dinners were her thing. No staff allowed in the kitchen. Rose smiled, handing Jessica a spoon to taste the sauce she was making. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. After she died, food just lost its meaning. Until your soup that night. Rose placed a gentle hand on Jessica's shoulder. Food made with love carries memories, child. Maybe that's what you've been hungry for. As the date of the charity gala approached, William was pleased with his daughter's recovery but worried about the event itself. The guest list included celebrities, politicians, and business partners, people used to the finest cuisine. Would Rose's home-style cooking be appropriate? I was thinking we might need to bring in a catering service for the gala, he mentioned cautiously over dinner one night. Jessica looked up sharply. What? Rose's food is perfect. For us, yes. But the gala is different. There are expectations. Rose interjected calmly. Mr. Winters is right, Jessica. A formal charity event requires different skills than family dinners. I've never cooked for hundreds of people. Jessica looked between them, disappointed but understanding the practical concerns. Then she had an idea. What if Rose designed the menu but had help executing it? We could hire kitchen staff to work under her direction. William considered this compromise. Would you be comfortable with that arrangement, Rose? Rose thought about it. The idea was intimidating but also exciting. I could do that if you're sure it's what you want. I trust your taste more than any celebrity chef, William said, and Jessica beamed at her father's endorsement. As they began planning the menu for the gala, none of them realized how this event would change all of their lives, especially Rose's. The week before the charity gala was chaotic. William was tied up with last-minute donations and press interviews, while Jessica helped Rose coordinate with the temporary kitchen staff hired to execute the menu. Rose had decided on elevated versions of comfort food, dishes that were familiar but prepared with the finest ingredients and elegant presentation. Rose was nervous but hiding it well. She had never been the center of attention like this before, always working behind the scenes in the household she served. Now she would be responsible for feeding some of the most influential people in the country. 3 days before the event, Jessica entered the kitchen to find Rose in an intense discussion with a tall, distinguished-looking man she didn't recognize. He was handsome, with salt and pepper hair and warm brown skin that glowed under the kitchen lights. His suit was impeccably tailored, suggesting wealth and importance. Rose looked up and smiled. Jessica, come meet my son James. He just arrived in town and surprised me. James extended his hand, his smile matching his mother's warmth. It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Winters. Mom has told me a lot about you. Jessica shook his hand, suddenly aware of her casual appearance in jeans and a simple t-shirt. Please call me Jessica. Your mother has become very important to our family. James nodded. So I've heard. From cook to head chef for a major charity gala, that's quite a promotion. There was pride in his voice, but Jessica detected a note of concern as well. She wondered what Rose had told him about their unusual arrangement. Your mother is amazing, Jessica said sincerely. She saved me in a way. James's expression softened. That sounds like her. Always taking care of everyone. Rose bustled around them, checking on various preparations. James is just in town for a few days. He runs his own investment firm in Chicago. Actually, James corrected, I'm considering opening an office here. It might be time for a change. This news seemed to surprise Rose, who paused her work to look at her son. You didn't mention that on the phone. James shrugged. It's still in the planning stages. But seeing you settled here made me think about it more seriously. Jessica felt a strange tension in the room and excused herself, leaving mother and son to talk privately. As she left, she couldn't help stealing another glance at James. There was something compelling about him, a quiet confidence that reminded her of her father, but with a warmth that William Winters often lacked in business settings. Later that day, Jessica ran into James again, this time in the garden where he was sitting on a bench, typing on his phone. Sorry to disturb you, she said, turning to leave. Not at all, James replied, putting his phone away. I was just answering some emails. Please join me. Jessica sat beside him, suddenly curious about this man who had been raised by Rose. Your mother is incredible. I've never met anyone who puts so much love into their cooking. James smiled. That's just how she is with everything. When I was growing up, we didn't have much, but our house was always the one where all the neighborhood kids wanted to eat dinner. She told me she raised you alone. That must have been difficult. It was, but she never let me feel it. She worked multiple jobs sometimes, but still made sure we had dinner together every night. He paused, looking at Jessica thoughtfully. She told me about your mother. I'm sorry for your loss. Jessica felt the familiar pang that came with mentions of her mother, but it wasn't as sharp as it once had been. Thank you. It's been 3 years, but sometimes it feels like yesterday. Grief doesn't follow a timetable, James said quietly. My father left when I was 5. Different circumstance, obviously, but I still remember how that absence felt. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, then James asked, So, what do you do besides hiring my mother away from her housekeeping duties? Jessica laughed. Officially, I'm the vice president of community relations at Winters Tech. Unofficially, I'm still trying to figure out what I actually want to do with my life. And what does Jessica Winters want, if you don't mind me asking? The question caught her off guard. People rarely asked her that. It was usually assumed that she would follow in her father's footsteps. I'm not entirely sure, she admitted. I love the foundation work, helping people. But the corporate side of things has never felt right to me. James nodded, understanding. It took me years to find my path. Everyone expected me to become a chef like Mom, but I discovered I had a head for numbers instead. The important thing is finding what makes you come alive. As they continued talking, Jessica felt an ease with James that she rarely experienced with new people, especially men. There was no need to impress him with her family name or achievements. He spoke to her like a person, not a billionaire's daughter. When Rose called James in to taste test one of the gala dishes, Jessica watched them interact. The easy affection, the gentle teasing, the implicit trust. It made her miss her own mother fiercely, but it also gave her a warm feeling to see such a loving relationship. That night at dinner, William noticed his daughter's unusual animation as she described the gala preparations. You seem excited about this event, he commented, pleased to see her enthusiasm. I am. Rose has created an amazing menu, and I think everyone will be impressed. She hesitated, then added, I met her son today. James. He's very nice. William raised an eyebrow. Jessica rarely showed interest in anyone outside their social circle. Is he staying for the gala? I think so. He's considering opening an office here. What line of work is he in? Investment management. He has his own firm in Chicago. William nodded, mentally filing away this information. Any man who caught his daughter's attention was worth knowing more about, especially one raised by Rose, whom he had come to respect greatly. As the days counted down to the gala, Jessica found herself looking forward to seeing James again. There was something refreshing about him. No pretense, no agenda, just honest conversation. It had been a long time since she'd felt this kind of simple connection with someone new. What she didn't know was that James was having similar thoughts about her. Behind the famous last name and wealthy upbringing, he had glimpsed a young woman struggling to find her authentic self, something he understood all too well. The day before the charity gala arrived with a flurry of activity. The Winters mansion transformed as decorators, florists, and event staff bustled through the halls, converting the already elegant home into a spectacular venue worthy of the high-profile guest list. In the kitchen, Rose was in her element despite the pressure. She moved with purpose, directing the temporary staff with firm but kind instructions, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, and ensuring every dish would be perfect. Jessica had never seen her so focused. Need any help? Jessica asked, watching Rose check a tray of delicate appetizers. Rose smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. Could you taste this and tell me what you think? It's a new recipe. Jessica tried the offered spoonful, a creamy soup with subtle flavors that bloomed on her tongue. That's incredible. What is it? Roasted cauliflower soup with truffle oil and crispy shallots. Simple ingredients, but it's all in the technique. It's perfect, Jessica assured her. Everything will be wonderful tomorrow. Rose's expression grew serious. I hope so. Your father has put a lot of trust in me. And it's well-deserved, came a deep voice from the doorway. James entered, looking remarkably put together despite having spent the morning helping move equipment into the kitchen. He had rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms, and his confident presence seemed to fill the room. Mom, you should take a break, he suggested. You've been on your feet since dawn. Rose waved him off. There's too much to do. The desserts aren't finished and we still need to. I can handle the desserts, Jessica interrupted. You showed me how yesterday, remember? Rose looked between the two of them, recognizing the alliance they had formed. All right, just a short break. James, will you make sure she doesn't add too much sugar to the berry compote? She has a sweet tooth. James grinned. Will do. Come on, Mom. 20 minutes, then you can come back and boss everyone around some more. As Rose reluctantly left with her son, Jessica turned to the dessert station, determined to prove herself useful. The charity gala was important to her father, but it had become personal for her too. She wanted Rose to shine. She was carefully measuring ingredients when a familiar voice startled her. Since when does my daughter make desserts? William stood in the kitchen doorway looking tired but amused. He'd been working non-stop on the foundation's latest research grant announcements, which would be revealed at the gala. Jessica smiled. Since Rose taught me. Did you need something, Dad? William entered the kitchen, surveying the controlled chaos with approval. Just checking on progress. It smells amazing in here. Everything's on track. Rose is taking a quick break, James made her. Ah, the famous James. William's tone was light but assessing. I should meet this young man properly before tomorrow's event. Jessica concentrated on her measuring, hoping her father wouldn't notice her slight blush. He's been helping a lot with the preparations. So I've heard. The staff says he's quite the problem solver. William picked up a strawberry from a nearby bowl and popped it into his mouth. Invite him to join us for dinner tonight. I'd like to thank him for his assistance. Before Jessica could respond, Rose returned, looking refreshed. She stopped short at the sight of her employer in her kitchen. Mr. Winters, is everything all right? William smiled warmly. More than all right, Rose. I just wanted to see how things were progressing. Jessica tells me your son has been a great help. James has always been good in a crisis, Rose said proudly. He got that from his father, not me. I tend to panic first, then solve the problem. Well, I'd like to thank him personally. Jessica will arrange for him to join us for dinner tonight. Rose looked surprised but pleased. That's very kind, sir. I'll let him know. As William left, Rose turned to Jessica with raised eyebrows. Dinner with the boss? That's a first. Jessica continued measuring ingredients, avoiding Rose's knowing look. Dad just wants to be polite. Rose hummed, not convinced. And it has nothing to do with how you light up whenever James walks into a room? Jessica nearly dropped the measuring cup. That's not. Rose laughed gently. It's okay, honey. He lights up too when he sees you. Before Jessica could process this information, one of the kitchen staff called Rose over to handle a minor crisis with the main course, leaving Jessica to her thoughts. Had she been that obvious? And more importantly, was Rose right about James? She'd noticed how easy it was to talk to him, how she found herself seeking him out over the past few days, but she'd attributed that to his connection to Rose. As she finished preparing the dessert components, Jessica tried to focus on the task at hand rather than the dinner ahead. But her mind kept drifting to James. His thoughtful questions, his kind eyes, the way he treated everyone from the gardener to her father's executive assistant with the same respect. Later that afternoon, she found James in the library, reviewing seating arrangements for the gala. My father has invited you to join us for dinner tonight, she said, trying to sound casual. James looked up, his expression unreadable. That's unexpected. Should I be nervous? Jessica laughed. Probably. He doesn't usually take much interest in the household staff's families. But I'm not just any staff member's family, am I? James asked, his eyes holding hers. The question hung between them, loaded with meaning beyond the obvious. Jessica felt her heart beat a little faster. No, she admitted softly. You're not. A smile spread across James's face, warm and genuine. Then I'd be honored to join you for dinner. That evening, Jessica took extra care with her appearance, choosing a simple but elegant dress that her mother had bought her on their last shopping trip together. It wasn't something she wore often, the memories were sometimes too painful, but tonight felt like the right occasion. When she came downstairs, James was already in the formal sitting room with her father, deep in conversation about market trends. James stood as she entered, his appreciation evident in his gaze. You look beautiful, he said simply. William watched this exchange with interest, noting his daughter's pleased smile and the young man's sincere admiration. As a father, he was naturally protective, but he also recognized something in James that reminded him of himself at that age. Ambitious but principled, confident but not arrogant. Dinner was served in the smaller family dining room rather than the formal one, creating a more intimate atmosphere. Rose had prepared the meal but insisted on having one of the regular staff serve it so she could finish gala preparations. The conversation flowed easily, with James holding his own as William subtly probed into his background, education, and business acumen. Jessica was impressed by how naturally James navigated her father's questioning, neither intimidated by William's status nor trying too hard to impress. So you started your firm from scratch? William asked, clearly impressed despite himself. James nodded. With a small inheritance from my grandmother and a lot of long nights. The first 2 years were tough, but we've grown consistently since then. And now you're considering expanding to our city? Yes, sir. I've been thinking about it for a while, but recent developments have made it more appealing. His eyes briefly met Jessica's before returning to William. William didn't miss the glance. Recent developments? New client opportunities, James answered smoothly. And of course, being closer to my mother would be a bonus. As dessert was served, the same one Jessica had helped prepare earlier, William raised his glass in a toast. To new opportunities, he said, looking meaningfully between James and his daughter. James raised his glass as well. And to your foundation, sir. My mother has told me about the important work you're doing in cancer research. A shadow crossed William's face. My wife would have appreciated knowing her experience might help others avoid the same fate. I'm sorry for your loss, James said quietly. From what Mom has told me, she was an extraordinary woman. She was, Jessica agreed, her voice soft with memory. She would have loved Rose's cooking too. They share the same philosophy about food and love. William looked at his daughter with surprise. It was the first time she had spoken so openly about her mother in years. Perhaps Rose's presence in their lives had healed more than just Jessica's appetite. As the evening wound down, William excused himself to finish some work before the gala, leaving Jessica and James alone. Your father is quite the interviewer, James commented with a smile. I felt like I was back in business school defending my thesis. Jessica laughed. Sorry about that. He's protective. As he should be, James said seriously. You're worth protecting. The sincerity in his voice made Jessica's breath catch. I've enjoyed getting to know you, James. Likewise, Jessica Winters. He paused, then added, would it be inappropriate if I asked to see you after the gala? When all this chaos has died down. Jessica felt a flutter of excitement. I think that could be arranged. As they said goodnight, there was a moment when Jessica thought he might kiss her, but James simply took her hand and squeezed it gently. Tomorrow's a big day. Get some rest. She watched him walk away, a strange mixture of disappointment and anticipation churning inside her. For the first time in years, Jessica was looking forward to more than just good food. She was looking forward to possibility. The night of the charity gala arrived, and the Winters mansion glowed with warmth and elegance. Soft lights illuminated the garden paths, string quartets played in strategic corners, and impeccably dressed staff circulated with trays of Rose's carefully crafted appetizers. Jessica stood beside her father in the grand foyer, greeting guests as they arrived. She wore a midnight blue gown that complemented her fair complexion, her mother's sapphire pendant at her throat. William, distinguished in his tuxedo, beamed with pride at the turnout. CEOs, celebrities, politicians, and philanthropists, all gathered to support the Elizabeth Winters Cancer Research Foundation. Have you checked on Rose? William asked between greetings. Is everything running smoothly in the kitchen? I stopped by earlier. She's in her element, Dad. Don't worry. William nodded, then leaned closer. And her son? Will he be joining us tonight? Jessica felt her cheeks warm. Yes, he's helping Rose until the main course is served, then he'll join the guests. William's expression was unreadable, but there was a knowing glint in his eye. Before he could comment further, the next wave of guests arrived, drawing their attention back to hosting duties. In the kitchen, organized chaos reigned. Rose moved with confident precision, orchestrating the temporary staff like a conductor with an orchestra. Plates were arranged with artistic care, sauces drizzled just so, garnishes placed with tweezers for perfect presentation. James worked alongside his mother, his suit jacket abandoned, sleeves rolled up, and a towel tucked into his waistband. He had fallen easily into the role of Rose's right hand, anticipating her needs and calmly handling small crises as they arose. You're a natural, Rose said, watching him redirect a flustered server. Sure you don't want to give up finance and open a restaurant with your old mother? James laughed. And compete with you? Never. As the appetizers were depleted and guests mingled in the magnificent ballroom, the kitchen prepared for the main course. Rose's signature roasted duck with cherry port reduction, accompanied by wild mushroom risotto and seasonal vegetables, prepared with the same love she put into family meals but elevated for the occasion. The head server entered the kitchen looking impressed. Mrs. Johnson, the guests are raving about the appetizers. Mr. Harrison, you know, the food critic from the Times, asked who the chef was. Rose tried to look calm, but her eyes shone with pride. What did you tell him? That the Winters family had discovered a hidden culinary genius. He's quite intrigued. As the server left to coordinate the main course service, James squeezed his mother's shoulder. I told you. This is just the beginning, Mom. Rose shook her head, but she was smiling. Let's get through tonight first before you start planning my celebrity chef career. Once the main course was successfully deployed, James changed into his backup dress shirt and rejoined the gala as a guest. He scanned the crowded ballroom, searching for a glimpse of midnight blue among the colorful gowns and black tuxedos. He found Jessica deep in conversation with an older couple, nodding seriously as they discussed something that appeared important. She looked poised and elegant, every inch the billionaire's daughter, Yet he could still see the warmth and authenticity that had first drawn him to her. James waited until the couple moved on before approaching. "Ms. Winters, the gala appears to be a tremendous success." Jessica turned, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Mr. Johnson, you clean up quite well for someone I last saw elbow-deep in sauce preparation." "Professional versatility is my specialty," he replied with a grin. "How are you holding up? These events can be exhausting." "Better now," she said honestly. "Have you eaten? You should try your mother's masterpiece." "I had a few bites in the kitchen. It's extraordinary, though I might be biased." "Your bias is well-founded. Everyone is asking about the chef." As they talked, William approached with a distinguished-looking man in an impeccable suit. "Jessica, James, I'd like you to meet Raymond Harrison from the New York Times." The food critics shook their hands warmly. "I was just complimenting your father on tonight's exceptional menu. A refreshing departure from the usual bland charity fare." "We're fortunate to have found Rose," William said. "She's transformed our household in many ways." "Rose Johnson," Raymond mused. "I don't recognize the name. Where did she train?" James stepped forward proudly. "My mother learned cooking from her grandmother in Louisiana. No formal training, just generations of knowledge passed down." Raymond's eyebrows rose with interest. "Your mother? How fascinating. Natural talent is so rare in this age of celebrity chef culture. I'd love to speak with her." "I'm sure that can be arranged," William said, "though perhaps after service is complete. She's quite focused at the moment." As the men continued their conversation, James noticed Jessica slip away toward the terrace doors. He followed, finding her leaning against the stone balustrade, looking out over the illuminated gardens. "Needed some air?" he asked, joining her. Jessica nodded. "Sometimes it all gets a bit performative. My mother used to escape to the kitchen during these events. I guess I inherited her discomfort with the spotlight. Yet you handle it gracefully. No one would guess you'd rather be elsewhere." She turned to look at him. "Where would you rather be, James Johnson?" He considered the question seriously. "Right here, actually. But perhaps with fewer people around." Their eyes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken possibility. From inside, the string quartet began a new piece, the music drifting out to the terrace. "Would you dance with me?" James asked suddenly. Jessica glanced back at the ballroom. "Out here? Why not? Better view, better company, same music." She laughed and placed her hand in his. "I can't argue with that logic." He drew her closer, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers with gentle strength. They moved together easily as if they'd danced 100 times before. "You're good at this," Jessica murmured. "Mom insisted I take lessons before my junior prom. Said no son of hers would shuffle around the dance floor like a lost bear." Jessica laughed, the sound rippling through the night air. "She's wise about many things." "She thinks very highly of you, you know," James said more seriously. "Says you remind her of herself at your age, searching for something real in a world that often values appearance over substance." Jessica considered this. "Your mother sees people clearly. I've been trying to find my place in all this," she gestured toward the mansion, "since I lost my mom. Food was our connection. When she died, that connection disappeared too until Rose came along." "Food connects people in powerful ways," James agreed. "It's not just nutrition, it's history, culture, love." They continued dancing, the music from inside creating their own private moment under the stars. Jessica found herself studying his face, the kindness in his eyes, the subtle smile lines, the thoughtful expression that seemed to truly see her. "What are you looking for, Jessica Winters?" he asked softly, echoing the question she'd asked him days before. "Authenticity," she answered without hesitation. "Something that feels real." Inside the ballroom, William Winters was searching for his daughter when Rose approached him, a concerned look on her face. "The dessert course is ready, Mr. Winters. Should we proceed or wait for Jessica to return?" William glanced around the room. "Where is she?" "On the terrace, sir. With James." There was a hint of maternal satisfaction in Rose's voice. William looked toward the terrace doors, just glimpsing the two figures dancing in the moonlight. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, perhaps, of a moment from his own past. "Let's give them a few more minutes," he said quietly. "Some things are more important than perfect timing." Rose nodded, understanding far more than just his instructions about dessert. "Yes, sir. They certainly are." The morning after the gala, Jessica woke to the sound of her phone buzzing repeatedly with notifications. Blinking sleepily, she reached for it, wondering what could be causing such a commotion so early. Her social media feeds were filled with photos from the previous night, elegant guests in designer wear, the beautifully decorated mansion, the foundation's announcement of its latest research grant. But what caught her attention were the comments about the food, with guests tagging the Winters family and asking about the mysterious chef. More surprising was a notification from her father, a link to Raymond Harrison's food blog, where he had already posted an unprecedented overnight review titled, Home Cooking Elevated, the surprise chef of the season. Jessica sat up in bed, fully awake now, and began to read. In an age of molecular gastronomy and chef-as celebrity culture, last night I was reminded of food's true purpose, to nourish not just the body but the soul. At the Elizabeth Winters Foundation Gala, I expected the usual catered fare, competent but forgettable. Instead, I discovered something extraordinary, authentic cooking with technical precision that rivals any Michelin-starred restaurant in the city. The woman behind this culinary revelation is Rose Johnson, previously the Winters family's head housekeeper, now their private chef. With no formal training but generations of family wisdom, Johnson created a menu that outshone establishments with decades of acclaim. The review continued, effusive in its praise for Rose's natural talent and unique approach. Jessica's heart swelled with pride for the woman who had brought so much healing to her life through simple, loving food. She quickly dressed and hurried downstairs, finding her father already in the dining room with his coffee and newspaper. What surprised her was seeing Rose seated at the table too, looking stunned as William read sections of the review aloud. Mrs. Johnson's roasted duck was nothing short of transcendent, crisp skin giving way to perfectly tender meat, the cherry port reduction adding complexity without overwhelming. But it was the humble cornbread with honey butter that revealed her true genius, elevating simplicity to art. William lowered the paper, grinning. He goes on for 3 more paragraphs about your desserts. Rose shook her head in disbelief. This can't be happening. I just cook the way my grandmother taught me. Well, your grandmother must have been a culinary genius, William replied. Harrison rarely gives reviews this positive, even to established restaurants. He's already called my office 3 times this morning. Jessica joined them, kissing her father's cheek and squeezing Rose's shoulder. Good morning. I see the news is out. Indeed, William said. And it's not just Harrison. I've received calls from 2 morning shows and a food magazine already. They all want to talk to Rose. Rose looked overwhelmed. Mr. Winters, I'm a cook, not a celebrity. I don't know about all this publicity. William's expression grew thoughtful. Rose, I've been thinking. This foundation was created to honor Elizabeth's memory and continue her passion for helping others. The gala last night raised more money than any previous event, partly because people were so impressed by the experience, by your food. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. What would you think about a more permanent arrangement? Not just as our family chef, but as the culinary director for all foundation events. Rose's eyes widened. Sir? Your food tells a story, Rose. It creates connection. That's exactly what our foundation events should do, connect people to our cause through meaningful experiences. With proper staff and resources at your disposal, of course. Jessica watched Rose process this offer, seeing the mixture of excitement and trepidation on her face. You deserve this, Rose. Your food changed everything for me, for us. Rose smiled at Jessica with maternal affection. It wasn't just the food, child. Before she could respond, James appeared in the doorway, also looking at his phone with an expression of amazement. Mom, have you seen this review? You're trending on social media. He looked up, noticing everyone at the table. Oh, good morning. Sorry to interrupt. William waved him in. Join us, James. I was just discussing a new opportunity with your mother. As James took a seat, William explained his proposal. James listened intently, occasionally glancing at Jessica with an expression she couldn't quite read. It's an incredible opportunity, Mom, he said when William finished. But it would be demanding work. You'd need help. That's why I mentioned a full staff, William agreed. Rose would be the creative director, but we'd hire professionals to execute her vision for larger events. Rose looked between her son and her employer. I'd need to think about it. This is all happening very fast. Of course, William said. Take all the time you need. In the meantime, we should probably decide how to handle these media requests. The foundation could use the positive publicity. As they discussed potential interviews and photo opportunities, Jessica noticed James growing quieter, a slight furrow appearing between his brows. When breakfast was over and Rose went to the kitchen to prepare lunch, Jessica followed James as he stepped outside to the garden. "You're concerned about something," she said, falling into step beside him. James slowed his pace, turning to face her. "I'm thrilled for my mother. She deserves recognition for her talent. You're worried people will take advantage of her," Jessica finished for him. He nodded. "Mom puts her heart into everything she does. In the culinary world, that kind of authenticity can be exploited or commercialized until it loses what made it special." Jessica considered this. "My father wouldn't do that to her. But I understand your concern. It's not just about your father. Once she's in the public eye, there will be opportunities, offers, cooking shows, product lines, book deals. The Rose Johnson everyone will want to package and sell isn't just a chef, she's my mother." His voice had grown protective. Jessica reached out, touching his arm lightly. "Then we'll make sure she has the right people around her. People who value what makes her special, not just what makes her marketable." James looked down at her hand on his arm, then covered it with his own. Jessica felt herself blush. "I care about her too, you know. And I understand something about living in the public eye while trying to protect what's genuine." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition of shared values, shared concerns. James's expression softened. "Last night on the terrace," he began hesitantly, "before we were called in for dessert." "James?" "Jessica." Rose's voice called from the terrace doors. "Phone call for both of you. It's that nice Mr. Harrison again." The moment broken, they walked back toward the house together. Before they reached the doors, James caught Jessica's hand, stopping her briefly. "We should continue our conversation," he said quietly. "Properly, without interruptions." Jessica felt her heart quicken. "I'd like that." Inside, the day unfolded in a whirlwind of calls, congratulations, and planning. William's assistant created a makeshift press schedule for Rose, who was beginning to adjust to the idea of her new public identity. Through it all, James stayed close to his mother, providing support and level-headed advice about which opportunities to consider and which to decline. Jessica found herself watching the mother and son with growing admiration. Their bond was evident in small gestures. Rose automatically fixing James's collar before a photo. James instinctively knowing when his mother needed a moment of quiet amid the chaos. It reminded her of her relationship with her own mother, the wordless understanding, the mutual support. For the first time since Elizabeth's death, the memory brought more warmth than pain. That evening, as the excitement finally began to settle, William called a family meeting in the library. To Jessica's surprise, he included Rose and James in the invitation. "I want to discuss next steps," William explained once they were all seated. "Rose, have you had time to consider my offer?" Rose looked at her son, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I have, Mr. Winters. I'd be honored to accept the position with one condition." William raised his eyebrows. "Which is?" "I want to establish a culinary scholarship program as part of the foundation, for talented home cooks who lack formal training or financial resources. People like me who might never have the chance to develop their skills otherwise." Jessica watched her father's face, seeing the mixture of surprise and respect in his expression. "That's an excellent idea," he said after a moment. "It aligns perfectly with our mission of creating opportunities from adversity." Rose smiled, relief evident in her posture. "Thank you, sir. Then I accept your offer." "Wonderful," William said, turning to James. "And what about you, young man? You mentioned opening an office here. Have you made any decisions on that front?" James seemed surprised to be included in the conversation. "I've been exploring options, sir. The right opportunity would need to align with my firm's values." William nodded thoughtfully. "The foundation is expanding its investment portfolio to support our new initiatives. We could use someone with your expertise. Perhaps we could discuss a consulting arrangement." Jessica stared at her father, hardly believing what she was hearing. William Winters, who rarely mixed personal and professional matters, was clearly creating connections to keep both Rose and James in their lives. James looked equally taken aback. "I'd be interested in learning more, sir." "Excellent. We'll set up a proper meeting next week." William stood, signaling the end of the discussion. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some calls to return before dinner." As William left the library, Rose followed to discuss the evening meal, leaving Jessica and James alone again. "Did that just happen?" James asked, a bemused smile playing on his lips. Jessica laughed softly. "I think my father just adopted you both into the family business." "Is that a good thing?" She considered the question seriously. "With my father, business is how he shows he values people. It's a compliment, trust me." James moved to sit beside her on the leather sofa. And what about you, Jessica Winters? How do you show people you value them? The directness of his question made her pause. In the past, she might have deflected with a witty comment or changed the subject. But something about James made her want to be honest. I'm still figuring that out, she admitted. For a long time after Mom died, I stopped trying to connect with people at all. It was easier to go through the motions, charity events, board meetings, social appearances, without really being present. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. And now, I think I'm learning to be present again. To let people in. She met his gaze steadily. Some people anyway. The air between them seemed to thicken with possibility. James reached out slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Jessica, he began, his voice low and serious, I know we've only known each other a short time, but... The library door swung open as Rose bustled in, then stopped abruptly when she saw how close they were sitting. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask about dinner preferences. Jessica felt her face flush, but James just smiled at his mother. No interruption, Mom. We were just talking about Dad's offers. Rose looked between them skeptically but didn't comment on their proximity. Well, I'm thinking of trying a new recipe tonight. Something special to celebrate. As Rose described her dinner plans, Jessica caught James's eye, sharing a silent moment of amusement and frustration at the timing. Whatever was developing between them would have to wait a little longer. But for the first time in years, Jessica found herself looking forward to whatever came next. A week after the gala, life at the Winters mansion had settled into a new rhythm. Rose's culinary scholarship program was taking shape with Jessica's help, while James divided his time between his Chicago office and planning for the new branch in their city. The media frenzy had calmed slightly, though Rose still received daily calls and emails with opportunities and requests. On Tuesday morning, Jessica was in the garden with Rose, discussing which herbs they might grow for the kitchen, when Thomas, the house manager, approached with an unusual announcement. Miss Winters, there's a visitor at the gate asking to see Mrs. Johnson. She says she's family but she's not on the approved list. Rose looked up with surprise. Family? Did she give a name? Eleanor Johnson, Thomas replied. She says she's Mrs. Johnson's sister-in-law. Rose's expression shifted from surprise to shock. Eleanor? That's James's aunt, my late husband's sister. We haven't spoken in years. Jessica noticed Rose's hands trembling slightly. Would you like me to have Thomas send her away? Rose shook her head slowly. No, I should see what she wants. It must be important for her to come all this way. Thomas nodded. I'll have her shown to the small reception room, Mrs. Johnson. As Thomas left, Jessica touched Rose's arm gently. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. In a way I have, Rose admitted. Eleanor and we had a falling out after Robert, my husband, died. She blamed me for some of his choices, and we haven't been in touch since James was about 10 years old. Does James know she's here? He's in meetings downtown all day. I should call him, but... Rose hesitated, looking torn. Jessica squeezed her hand. Why don't you see what she wants first? I can stay nearby if you need support. Gratitude filled Rose's eyes. Thank you, dear. Let's go inside. The woman waiting in the reception room was tall and elegant, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun and an expensive-looking suit that spoke of wealth and taste. She stood as they entered, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Jessica. Rose, she said, her voice cultured but cool. It's been a long time. Eleanor. Rose's greeting was equally reserved. This is Jessica Winters, my employer's daughter. Eleanor inclined her head politely. Miss Winters. I apologize for the intrusion. Not at all, Jessica replied smoothly, channeling the diplomatic skills she'd learned from years of charity functions. Can I offer you some refreshment? Tea perhaps. That won't be necessary, Eleanor said. I won't be staying long. Rose gestured to the seating area. Then let's sit and you can tell me what brings you here after all these years. Once they were seated, Eleanor got straight to the point. I saw your picture in the New York Times, Rose. Culinary genius discovers after years as housekeeper. Quite the story. There was an edge to her words that made Jessica instantly protective of Rose. Mrs. Johnson is exceptionally talented, Jessica said firmly. The recognition is well-deserved. Eleanor's gaze moved to Jessica, assessing. I'm sure. The Winters family has obviously taken quite an interest in Rose's talents. The implication in her tone made Jessica bristle, but Rose placed a calming hand on her arm. "What do you want, Eleanor?" Rose asked directly. Eleanor opened her designer handbag and removed a folded newspaper clipping. It wasn't just the Times article. There was a photo from the gala, you with your son. She pushed the clipping across the coffee table. "He looks just like Robert." The photograph showed Rose and James at the gala, both smiling proudly at the camera. Jessica had to admit that without knowing James personally, someone might look at his features and see a family resemblance to whoever his father had been. Rose looked at the photo, her expression softening. "Yes, he does. He has Robert's eyes and his way with numbers. But he has my heart, Eleanor. Always has." Eleanor seemed to struggle with something internal before speaking again. "The Johnson family has a legacy, Rose. Old Charleston money. When Robert married you and moved to that little town in Louisiana, they essentially disowned him. When he died, I tried to reconnect with James, my nephew, my blood, but you shut me out. Is that how you remember it?" Rose's voice was quiet but firm. "Because I remember you showing up at my door and telling me that Robert had married down, and that his death was punishment for turning his back on his family obligations. I remember you offering to take my 10-year-old son and raise him properly as a Johnson, while making it clear I wouldn't be welcome in his life." Jessica watched the exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't just about the newspaper article. This was old pain, old class prejudice, old wounds being reopened. Eleanor had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I was grieving. We all were. Perhaps I didn't express myself well." "Perhaps not," Rose agreed, her dignity intact despite the painful memories. "Now why are you here, Eleanor?" "It's been 20 years. Eleanor straightened her already perfect posture. "The family has noticed James's success with his investment firm. And now this connection to the Winters family." Her eyes flickered to Jessica. "Robert's parents, James's grandparents, are in their 80s now. They've been asking about their grandson. They want to meet him before it's too late." Rose absorbed this information silently, her expression guarded. "And," Eleanor continued, "now that you've achieved some prominence, they believe it might be time to heal old wounds." The implication was clear. Rose was acceptable to the Johnson family now that she had connections to wealth and influence, things they valued. Jessica couldn't remain silent any longer. "Mrs. Johnson has been prominent for decades, as a mother, a professional, and a woman of extraordinary talent and character. If her son's grandparents are only now deciding she's worthy of their attention, perhaps they're the ones who need to reconsider their values." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "This is a family matter, Miss Winters?" "Rose is family to us," Jessica replied calmly, surprised by her own certainty but knowing it was true. In just a few months, Rose had become essential to the Winters household, not just for her cooking, but for the wholeness she had restored to their lives. Rose reached out, squeezing Jessica's hand in silent thanks before turning back to Eleanor. "James is an adult now, Eleanor. He makes his own decisions about family relationships. If his grandparents want to meet him, they should reach out to him directly." She paused, then added more gently, "I won't stand in the way of that connection if he wants it." Eleanor seemed surprised by this response. Perhaps she had expected anger or rejection. "You've changed, Rose?" Rose smiled slightly. "Not really. I've always wanted what's best for my son. That hasn't changed." A moment of understanding passed between the two women, not quite reconciliation, but recognition of the love they both felt for James, however differently expressed. Eleanor stood, gathering her belongings. "I'll tell them to contact him directly then. Thank you for seeing me." As she turned to leave, she paused, looking back at Rose. "For what it's worth, Robert would be proud of you both." After Eleanor left, Rose sat quietly, her eyes distant with memories. Jessica stayed beside her, offering silent support until Rose was ready to speak. "Family is complicated," Rose said finally. "Robert came from wealth and privilege, but he wanted a simpler life. His family never forgave him for choosing me, a girl from the wrong side of town with no pedigree or connections. Their loss," Jessica said firmly. "Look at the amazing son you raised without their help." Rose smiled, though her eyes remained sad. "James doesn't know much about that side of his family. I probably should have told him more, but the hurt was too fresh for a long time. Then it just seemed easier to leave the past behind." "Will you tell him about Eleanor's visit?" Rose nodded. "Yes. He deserves to know and make his own choice about whether to connect with his grandparents. I just hope." She trailed off looking worried. "Hope what?" Jessica prompted gently. "I hope it doesn't change how he sees himself, or me. We've been enough for each other for so long." Jessica understood Rose's fear. that James might be drawn to the wealth and status of his father's family, that he might see his mother's simpler background differently after connecting with the Johnsons. "Rose," Jessica said firmly, "James adores you. Nothing could change that. You should have seen how he defended you to that food critic, how proud he was to say, 'My mother learned from her grandmother, not some fancy school.' That's who he is." Rose's expression lightened slightly. "You're right. I just never expected the past to come walking through the door like this." "Life has a way of surprising us," Jessica agreed. "Like a housekeeper who turns out to be a culinary genius, or a billionaire's daughter who couldn't eat until she tasted soup made with love." They shared a smile, the bond between them growing stronger through this new challenge. As they left the reception room, Jessica realized how protective she felt of both Rose and James, and how quickly they had become important to her. Later that evening, when James returned from his meetings, Rose told him about Eleanor's visit in the privacy of her cottage on the estate grounds. Jessica had offered to be present for support, but Rose had gently declined, saying this was something she needed to do alone as a mother. Jessica was in the library when James found her afterward, his expression thoughtful and slightly troubled. "Rose told me you stood up for her today," he said, sitting beside her on the window seat that overlooked the gardens. "Thank you for that." Jessica set down her book. "Your aunt was quite direct." James gave a humorless laugh. "That's diplomatic of you. From what Mom described, condescending might be more accurate." "How do you feel about possibly meeting your grandparents?" Jessica asked carefully. James was quiet for a moment, looking out at the darkening garden. "Curious, I suppose. And angry on Mom's behalf. And maybe a little sad about what might have been." Jessica nodded, understanding the complexity of his emotions. "You don't have to decide anything right away. Mom said the same thing." He turned to look at her directly. "She also said you called her family." Jessica felt her cheeks warm under his intense gaze. She is. She has been since the first bowl of soup she made me." James moved closer, taking her hand in his. "You know, when Mom first told me she was working for the Winters family, I was worried. Rich people don't always see staff as real people with real lives." "And now?" Jessica asked softly. "Now I understand why she loves it here. Why she loves you." The simple declaration hung between them, loaded with meaning beyond the obvious. Jessica found herself unable to look away from his eyes, so full of warmth and something more. "James," she began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say, only knowing that something important was happening between them. "I keep trying to find the right moment to talk to you properly," he said, his voice low and intimate in the quiet library. "But every time I try, something interrupts us." Jessica smiled, remembering the various moments that had been cut short over the past week. "Like your mother asking about dinner preferences, or my father wanting to discuss foundation business." "Exactly." James's smile matched hers but then grew more serious. "Jessica, I need to be honest with you. I'm falling for you, probably have been since that first night in the kitchen when you were eating my mother's soup. But our situations are complicated." "Because you're the chef's son and I'm the billionaire's daughter?" Jessica asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. "That's part of it. There's also the fact that our families are now professionally connected. If things didn't work between us, it could make things awkward," Jessica finished for him. "I understand. But does that mean we shouldn't even try?" James looked at their intertwined fingers, then back to her eyes. "No. It means we should be sure before we take any steps. I don't want to risk hurting my mother's position here, or the foundation work that's so important to your father." Jessica appreciated his thoughtfulness even as she felt a tug of disappointment. "So what are you suggesting?" "That we give ourselves time to know each other better, away from all this." He gestured around at the mansion. "Just James and Jessica, not the chef's son and the billionaire's daughter." The idea was appealing. A chance to explore their connection without the weight of family expectations or complications. "I'd like that," Jessica said simply. James's smile brightened his entire face. "Good. Because I've been wanting to do this since the night of the gala." He leaned forward, his hand gently cradling her face as his lips met hers in a kiss that was both tender and certain. Jessica felt something unlock inside her, the same feeling she'd had with that first taste of Rose's soup, a recognition of something essential that had been missing. When they finally pulled apart, James rested his forehead against hers. "Was that okay?" Jessica laughed softly. "More than okay. Though I'm surprised we weren't interrupted by a kitchen emergency or a foundation call." As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a message. They both laughed, the moment of tension broken. "See what I mean about timing?" James said with a rueful smile. Jessica checked her phone quickly. It's Rose actually. She wants to know if we'd like to help test recipes for the Foundation's next event. James stood, extending his hand to help her up. I think we can manage that. Ready to return to the real world, Ms. Winters? Jessica took his hand, feeling more like herself than she had in years. Lead the way, Mr. Johnson. As they walked toward the kitchen together, Jessica realized that the mansion felt different now, warmer, more alive. It wasn't just Rose's cooking that had transformed their lives, it was the love she brought with her, a love that was now expanding to include new connections and possibilities. For the first time since losing her mother, Jessica felt truly hungry for what life had to offer. 2 weeks after Eleanor's unexpected visit, James received a formal letter from his paternal grandparents, Robert and Margaret Johnson of Charleston. The heavy cream envelope with its embossed return address arrived at his temporary office downtown, bypassing the Winters mansion entirely, a detail that didn't escape Jessica's notice when he showed it to her. They did their research, she commented as they sat in the mansion's sunroom, the envelope between them on the glass table. Found your business address instead of asking your mother where you're staying. James nodded, his expression guarded. Efficient and impersonal. Apparently a Johnson family specialty. He hadn't opened the letter yet. After receiving it that morning, he'd called his mother, then texted Jessica asking if they could meet when she returned from her Foundation meeting. Now, with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, he seemed reluctant to break the seal that would connect him to a family history he'd never known. You don't have to open it, Jessica said gently. Or you don't have to open it now. James took a deep breath. No, I want to know what they have to say. It's just strange to think these people are my blood relatives, yet complete strangers. With careful movements, he opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The stationery was expensive, the handwriting elegant but slightly shaky, the script of an elderly person trying to maintain precision. Jessica watched his face as he read, seeing the play of emotions, surprise, curiosity, and something like regret. They want to meet me, he said finally, looking up from the letter. They acknowledge that they made grave errors in judgment regarding my mother after my father died, and they hope it's not too late to connect with their only grandson. Do you believe them? Jessica asked carefully. James refolded the letter, his movements deliberate. I don't know. People can change, especially when facing their own mortality. They're in their 80s now. What does Rose think? She said it's entirely my decision and she'll support whatever I choose. He smiled slightly. That's Mom, always putting my feelings first. Jessica reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. What do you want to do? James turned his hand to hold hers properly. I think I want to meet them. Not for their sake but for mine. And maybe for my father's memory too. Then you should, Jessica said, squeezing his hand encouragingly. There's a complication, James continued, looking slightly uncomfortable. They've invited me to Charleston next weekend for their 60th wedding anniversary celebration. Family only, but they've specifically included you in the invitation. Jessica blinked in surprise. Me? But they don't even know me. James grimaced. Apparently, Eleanor told them about us, whatever she observed or assumed during her visit. The letter mentions your special friend, Miss Winters. Despite the seriousness of the moment, Jessica couldn't help a small laugh. Special friend? That's charmingly old-fashioned. It gets better, James said with a hint of amusement breaking through his concern. They're delighted that I found someone from a good family, and look forward to welcoming the Winters connection to our lineage. Jessica's smile faded. Oh, so they're impressed by my last name and my father's money. It seems so, James admitted, looking troubled. I'm sorry, Jessica. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted nothing to do with this. It's presumptuous of them and honestly a bit offensive. Jessica considered this. The Johnsons' attitude was sadly familiar, the same social calculations she'd witnessed all her life, where people were valued for their connections and bank accounts rather than their character. It was exactly the kind of thinking she tried to avoid. What would you like me to do? She asked, deciding that James's feelings were what mattered most. He looked surprised by the question. You'd actually consider coming? If you want me there, yes. It might be easier to face long-lost relatives with some support. James's expression softened with gratitude. I would actually, but only if Mom comes too. I won't go without her. Have you asked her? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. He hesitated, then added, the letter doesn't mention her being invited. Jessica frowned. That's telling. Yes, James agreed grimly. Especially since they claim to regret their treatment of her. So what now? James stood, pulling Jessica gently to her feet as well. Now we go talk to my mother. Together. They found Rose in the kitchen garden, harvesting fresh herbs for that evening's dinner. She looked up as they approached, immediately noticing the envelope in James's hand. You opened it, she said simply, brushing soil from her gardening gloves. James nodded. They want to meet me, Mom. They've invited me to their anniversary celebration in Charleston next weekend. Rose's expression revealed nothing as she carefully placed the harvested herbs in her basket. I see. And have you decided what you want to do? I'm considering going, James said carefully, but only under certain conditions. Rose raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. First, you would need to come with me. I won't go if you're not invited. Rose's expression softened. James, honey, this is your chance to connect with your father's family. Don't make it conditional on my account. It's not negotiable, Mom, James said firmly. If they truly regret how they treated you, they should welcome you too. Rose looked between her son and Jessica, noticing their joined hands with a small smile. And what's the second condition? James glanced at Jessica. They've already invited Jessica, actually. Apparently, Eleanor mentioned her. Did she now? Rose looked amused. And are you going, Jessica? I'd like to support James, Jessica replied honestly. But I don't want to intrude on a family matter. Rose studied them both for a moment, then sighed. Your father would be proud of the man you've become, James. He always said you had a good heart. She removed her gardening gloves. If you want to meet your grandparents, we'll go together, all three of us if Jessica is willing. James's relief was visible. Thank you, Mom. Don't thank me yet, Rose cautioned. I'll need to make a Johnson family recipe for dinner tonight, to remind myself of what I'm getting into. That evening, over Rose's perfect southern fried chicken, which she revealed was her late mother-in-law's recipe, taught to her during the brief period before the family rift, they discussed the logistics of the Charleston trip. William joined them, raising an eyebrow when he heard about the Johnson family's sudden interest in reconnecting. Convenient timing, he commented dryly. After Rose becomes a culinary celebrity and James establishes a successful investment firm. Dad, Jessica admonished, though she secretly agreed with his assessment. William held up his hands in surrender. Just an observation. But I think you're making the right choice, James. Family connections are important, even complicated ones. James nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate your understanding, sir. And thank you for giving Jessica time off to accompany us. William smiled, his eyes moving between his daughter and James with knowing approval. Just be back for the foundation board meeting the following Tuesday. Both of you. The implication that James was already considered part of their professional family circle wasn't lost on anyone at the table. The next few days passed in a flurry of preparations. James confirmed their attendance with his grandparents, politely but firmly stating that both his mother and Jessica would be accompanying him. The response came quickly. All three were welcome, though the slight delay suggested there might have been some discussion behind the scenes. For Rose, the approaching visit stirred up memories of her early marriage. The culture shock of meeting Robert's wealthy family, their initial coldness, and the gradual thawing that had occurred until Robert's decision to move away from Charleston had reopened old wounds. She was quieter than usual, often lost in thought as she cooked, but she assured both James and Jessica that she was at peace with the reunion. Life's too short for old grudges, she said as they packed for the trip. And I want you to know your father's people, James. They're part of who you are, even if they haven't been part of your life. The flight to Charleston was brief but tense. Jessica sat beside James, their hands linked for much of the journey, while Rose gazed out the window, perhaps seeing the young woman she had once been, traveling to this same city as a new bride, full of hope and uncertainty. They checked into their hotel. Jessica had insisted on arranging the accommodations, refusing the Johnsons' offer to stay at the family estate, and took a few hours to rest before the evening's dinner. It would be a small family gathering before the larger anniversary celebration the following day. Are you nervous? Jessica asked James as they walked through the hotel lobby that evening, waiting for Rose to join them. James adjusted his tie, a subtle sign of his tension. More than I expected to be. These people are strangers who share my DNA. It's an odd concept. Just remember why you're doing this, Jessica said gently. For yourself and for your father's memory. James squeezed her hand gratefully. And I have you and Mom for moral support. I couldn't do this alone. Rose appeared then, looking elegant in a simple navy dress that Jessica had helped her select. There was a quiet dignity about her that transcended fashion, a core strength that had seen her through life's challenges and brought her to this moment of reconciliation. The Johnson estate was exactly as one might imagine an old Charleston family home, a grand antebellum mansion set back from the street, with imposing columns and meticulously maintained gardens. As their car pulled through the wrought iron gates, Rose took a deep breath. "It hasn't changed," she murmured. 25 years and it looks exactly the same." A butler greeted them at the door, his formal manner softening slightly when he recognized Rose. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "It's wonderful to see you again after all these years." Rose smiled warmly. "Thomas, you're still here? It's been a long time." "Indeed it has, ma'am. The family is waiting in the drawing room." As Thomas led them through the grand foyer, Rose whispered to James and Jessica, "Thomas was kind to me when I first came here as Robert's wife. Some things you don't forget." The drawing room was an elegant space frozen in time. Antique furniture, family portraits, and the subtle scent of lemon polish and old money. Standing as they entered were an elderly couple, their bearing regal despite their advanced years, and beside them Eleanor and a man who appeared to be her husband. For a moment no one spoke. James stood tall between his mother and Jessica, his resemblance to the man in the portrait above the fireplace suddenly striking. The elderly gentleman broke the silence first, his voice wavering slightly with age or emotion. "James, you look so much like your father." James stepped forward, offering his hand. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for inviting us." Robert Johnson Sr. took his grandson's hand in both of his own, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Call me grandfather, please. We've waited so long for this moment." Margaret Johnson approached next, her movements slow but graceful. She embraced James briefly, then turned to Rose with visible hesitation. "Rose," she said formally, "thank you for coming. And for bringing our grandson to us." Rose nodded, her dignity intact. "Margaret, Robert, your home is as beautiful as I remember." There was tension in the air, decades of unspoken hurt and regret, but also a fragile hope. Eleanor introduced her husband, Charles, who seemed uncomfortable with the emotional undercurrents but polite enough. "And this must be Miss Winters," Margaret said, turning to Jessica with considerably more warmth than she had shown Rose. "We're delighted you could join us." Jessica smiled politely, careful to stay close to Rose. "Thank you for including me, Mrs. Johnson. It's a pleasure to meet James's family." Dinner was served in the formal dining room, where family silver gleamed under chandelier light and the conversation remained carefully polite, focusing on safe topics: James's education and career, the success of the gala, Jessica's work with the foundation. Rose spoke little, listening and observing as her son navigated this new terrain with impressive grace. It wasn't until dessert was served that Robert Sr. finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I owe you both an apology," he said, looking first at Rose then at James. "When Robert died we were lost in our own grief. We handled things badly." "Very badly," Margaret added, her voice soft with regret. "We should have embraced you both as family, not pushed you away." Rose met their gaze steadily. "It was a difficult time for everyone." "That's no excuse," Robert Sr. insisted. "We were wrong and we've regretted it for years. But pride." He sighed heavily. "Pride is a powerful force in old families like ours." James leaned forward slightly. "Why now? After all this time?" Eleanor spoke up from her end of the table. "When I saw Rose in the newspaper, I realized how much time had passed. Mother and father aren't getting any younger. It seemed important to try now before it's too late. And," Margaret added with surprising candor, "seeing that Rose had built such a successful life without any help from us was humbling. We could no longer tell ourselves that our interference would have been for the best." Jessica watched the interplay of emotions across the faces around the table. Regret, hope, caution, yearning. Families were complicated ecosystems, she knew, having navigated her own after her mother's death. Healing required both honesty and forgiveness. "I'd like to know more about my father," James said after a thoughtful pause. "Not just the family history but who he was as a person. The man who fell in love with my mother and chose a different path from the one expected of him." Something shifted in the atmosphere then. A collective release of breath, as if James had granted permission for the real conversation to begin. Robert Sr. smiled, his aged face lighting up with memories. "He was brilliant but restless," he began. "Never content with the expected path. From the time he was a boy he questioned everything." As the stories flowed, Robert Jr.'s childhood adventures, his rebellious college years, his unexpected talent for cooking that had been discouraged as unsuitable for a Johnson heir, Rose occasionally added her own memories, gradually becoming part of the narrative rather than an outsider to it. Jessica observed it all with a growing sense of hope. The walls weren't coming down all at once, but windows were being opened, allowing fresh air into rooms long sealed by grief and pride. Later that night, back at the hotel, Rose seemed lighter somehow, as if setting down a burden she'd carried for decades. "They're trying," she said as they gathered in her suite for a nightcap. "It's more than I expected." James sat beside his mother on the sofa. "Are you okay with going back tomorrow for the anniversary celebration? It will be a much larger crowd." Rose nodded. "I'm ready. And it's important for you to meet the extended family." She smiled at Jessica. "I'm grateful you're with us. You've been a stabilizing presence." Jessica felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "I haven't done anything but be there." "Sometimes that's everything," James said, his eyes meeting hers with meaning. "Having someone who stands beside you without being asked." The next day's celebration was indeed a larger affair, with Johnson relatives from across the country gathered to honor Robert and Margaret's 60 years of marriage. James was introduced to cousins, great-aunts and family friends, many of whom commented on his resemblance to his father. Rose moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, reconnecting with those who had known her during her brief time as part of the Charleston social scene. To Jessica's surprise, several of the older women embraced Rose warmly, making it clear that not everyone had approved of how she had been treated after Robert's death. "Your mother-in-law is quite remarkable," an elderly woman commented to Jessica as they watched Rose chatting with some of Robert's cousins. "To return here with such grace after everything, not many would have the strength." Jessica smiled, not bothering to correct the assumption about her relationship to Rose. "She is extraordinary. In every way. And you and James? That looks serious to me," the woman said with the directness of the very old. Jessica felt herself blush. "We're exploring possibilities." The woman patted her hand approvingly. "Good. The Johnsons need fresh blood. Too much inbreeding among the old families, if you ask me. Creates weak chins and narrow minds." Jessica laughed, charmed by the woman's candor. As she moved through the party, she found herself drawn into the family dynamics, observing the various relationship currents and power structures. It wasn't so different from the social world she'd grown up in, though perhaps with deeper historical roots. The highlight of the celebration was a formal toast by Robert Sr. to his wife of 60 years, a heartfelt speech that moved many to tears. What caught Jessica's attention, however, was the moment immediately afterward, when he called James to his side. "I want to welcome my grandson James, who has returned to the family fold," he announced, his arm around James's shoulders. "And to thank his mother, Rose, for raising such a fine young man, and for having the generosity of spirit to allow this reunion." Across the room, Jessica saw Rose wipe away a tear, and felt her own eyes grow moist. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, there were still undercurrents of tension, particularly from Eleanor's direction, but it was a beginning. Later, as the celebration continued around them, James found a moment to pull Jessica into a quiet corner of the garden. "Thank you for being here," he said, taking both her hands in his. "It's meant everything to have you witness this." Jessica smiled up at him. "I wouldn't have missed it. Seeing you connect with your father's family, watching your mother find some peace with the past, it's been beautiful, James." He studied her face in the soft garden lighting. "You know, my grandparents aren't entirely wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "About us. About the possibilities." He moved closer, his voice lowering. "I know we said we'd take things slowly, give ourselves time to know each other better. But these past few weeks, watching you with my mother, seeing how you stand up for what matters to you, I'm already falling in love with you, Jessica Winters." The declaration, simple and honest, made her heart swell. There in a garden far from home, surrounded by strangers connected to James by blood but not experience, Jessica felt more certain than she had about anything in years. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted softly. "And it has nothing to do with your newly discovered family connections or your professional success. It's just you, James. The man who helps his mother in the kitchen and asks thoughtful questions and sees me as more than a billionaire's daughter." He cupped her face gently, his eyes full of emotion. "Can I kiss you now, or will we be interrupted again by someone asking about dinner preferences?" Jessica laughed, rising on tiptoes to meet him halfway. "I think we're safe this time." Their kiss deepened with shared feeling, a promise of something real and lasting. When they finally parted, James kept her close, their foreheads touching. "When we get home," he murmured, "I want to take you on a proper date. Just the two of us, somewhere my mother isn't cooking and your father isn't watching." I'd like that, Jessica agreed. Though I'll miss Rose's cooking. She'll understand. She's been trying to give us privacy for weeks. He smiled against her lips. Though I suspect she's been quietly rooting for us all along. Mothers usually know, Jessica said, a bittersweet pang accompanying the thought of her own mother, who would never meet James or see how happy he made her. As if reading her thoughts, James said gently, I wish I could have known your mother too. She would have loved you, Jessica told him with certainty. She believed in authenticity above all else. That's why she kept cooking for us even when we could afford a team of chefs. She said food made with love tasted different. Like mother, like daughter, James observed. You recognized that quality in my mom's cooking when no one else did. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the sound of someone clearing their throat nearby. They turned to find Rose watching them with undisguised happiness. I'm sorry to intrude, she said, not looking sorry at all, but your grandmother is asking for both of you. She wants to show James some family photographs. James kept his arm around Jessica's waist as they followed Rose back inside. Perfect timing as usual, Mom. Rose's eyes twinkled with mischief. A mother develops a sixth sense about these things. But don't worry, I'll work on my timing once we're home. Oh. The word encompassed so much now. The Winters mansion where Rose had brought healing through her cooking, the cottage on the grounds where she and James had created their own space, the foundation offices where new beginnings were taking shape. Home wasn't just a place anymore, it was the people who made life taste rich and full. As they rejoined the Johnson family gathering, Jessica felt a deep contentment. Life had unexpected ingredients sometimes, but in the hands of someone who knew how to blend them with love and care, even the most unlikely combinations could create something beautiful. 6 months after the Charleston trip, life had settled into a new and happier rhythm for everyone involved. Rose's culinary scholarship program was flourishing, with 5 promising students already enrolled in training under her guidance. James had successfully opened his firm's new branch in the city, balancing his professional responsibilities with his growing relationship with Jessica. The Johnson grandparents had visited twice, their relationship with Rose gradually warming as they witnessed her success and the depth of her bond with James. William Winters had watched these developments with quiet approval, particularly the positive effect on his daughter. Jessica seemed to have found her purpose, dividing her time between foundation work and helping Rose mentor the scholarship recipients. More importantly, she radiated a happiness he hadn't seen since before Elizabeth's death. On a crisp autumn evening, William invited Rose to join him in his study after dinner. It was unusual for them to meet formally this way, their working relationship having evolved into something more familial over time. Is everything all right, Mr. Winters? Rose asked as she settled into the leather chair across from his desk. William smiled reassuringly. More than all right, Rose. I wanted to discuss something important with you, something I should have done months ago. Rose waited curiously as William opened his desk drawer and removed a folder. When Elizabeth was diagnosed, he began, his voice softening at the mention of his late wife, we talked a lot about what would happen afterward, to me, to Jessica, to the foundation. She made me promise several things. Rose nodded understanding. Such conversations were part of facing mortality, difficult but necessary. One of the promises, William continued, was that I wouldn't let Jessica lose herself in grief, that I'd make sure she found joy again. He opened the folder, revealing legal documents. For the past 3 years, I've watched my daughter withdraw from life, going through the motions without any real enjoyment. Then you came into our home and everything changed. Rose shook her head modestly. I just cooked food she could enjoy, Mr. Winters. You did far more than that, Rose. You brought life back into this house. You reminded us both that meals aren't just about nutrition, they're about connection, about family. He pushed the folder toward her. That's why I want to offer you a more permanent arrangement. Rose looked at the document, her eyes widening as she understood its contents. This is a partnership agreement, she said, surprised. William nodded. I want to make you a full partner in the Elizabeth Winters Culinary Academy. Not just an employee or a director, but an owner with equal decision-making authority and profit participation. Rose was speechless, her hands trembling slightly as she touched the papers. The foundation will still provide the initial funding, William explained, but going forward, it would be your vision that shapes the academy. Your name would be on the door alongside Elizabeth's. I don't know what to say, Rose finally managed. This is incredibly generous. William's expression was earnest. It's not generosity, Rose. It's recognition of your value, your talent, and the difference you've made in our lives. Elizabeth would have wanted this. She believed in supporting women who had the courage to follow their passion, regardless of background or circumstance. Rose looked down at the papers again, visibly moved. "I would be honored to accept, Mr. Winters." "William, please," he said with a smile. "I think we're well past formalities at this point, especially considering—" He trailed off, but his meaning was clear. The relationship between James and Jessica had grown serious, creating a different kind of potential family connection. Rose smiled, understanding the unspoken implication. "Especially considering our children seem quite attached to each other." "Indeed." William leaned forward slightly. "Has James mentioned anything to you about his intentions?" Rose's smile widened. "He asked for my blessing last week. And for his grandmother's ring." William sat back, satisfied. "Good. Jessica deserves someone who understands the value of family traditions and proper timing." As they discussed the details of the partnership agreement, neither mentioned the younger couple's relationship further. Some things were better left to unfold in their own time without parental intervention. Across town, James and Jessica were enjoying a rare evening away from both families, having dinner at a small bistro they had discovered during their early dating days. It wasn't fancy by Winter's standards, but the food was excellent and the atmosphere intimate. "You're quiet tonight," Jessica observed as James toyed with his dessert. "Everything okay with the new office?" James nodded, setting down his fork. "The business is fine. Better than fine, actually. We just signed 2 new major clients this week." "That's wonderful." Jessica reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "We should celebrate." "Actually," James said, his voice taking on a nervous quality Jessica rarely heard from him, "I was hoping to celebrate something else tonight." Before she could ask what he meant, James stood from his chair and, to her complete surprise, knelt beside the table. The restaurant's other patrons fell silent, watching with anticipation. "Jessica Winters," James began, his voice steady despite the emotion visible in his eyes, "these past months have been the most meaningful of my life. You've shown me what it means to be truly seen and valued for who I am, not what I have or who my family might be." He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Opening it revealed a vintage ring with a modest but beautiful diamond surrounded by delicate filigree work. "This was my grandmother's ring, my maternal grandmother, who taught my mother to cook with love and would have adored you." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Jessica. I love your compassion, your determination, your authenticity. I want to build a life with you, a life filled with the same kind of love my mother taught me to recognize in the simplest things. Will you marry me?" The restaurant had gone completely silent, all eyes on them. Jessica felt tears spring to her eyes as she looked at the man before her. Not the successful investment manager or the heir to a rediscovered family legacy, but James, who had stood by his mother through difficult years, who saw people for their true worth, who had helped her rediscover joy in the simplest pleasures. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with certainty. "Yes, I will marry you, James." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the restaurant erupted in applause. James rose to kiss her, a kiss full of promise for the future they would build together. Later that night, as they walked through the park near Jessica's apartment, she asked him a question that had been on her mind. "Are you sure you want to take this step now? With all the changes happening in both our lives?" James stopped walking, turning to face her under the soft glow of a park lamp. "I've never been more certain of anything, Jessica." "What? Are you having doubts?" She shook her head quickly. "No doubts about us. Just practical considerations. My father's company, your expanding firm, our families." James took both her hands in his. "Those are all good things, but they're not what matters most. What matters is this, us, the connection we've built, the values we share. Everything else is just logistics." Jessica laughed softly. "That's very romantic, but logistics matter too. Where will we live? How will we balance our careers? What about children someday?" "All questions we'll answer together," James assured her. "But I know one thing for certain. Whatever home we create will always have a kitchen where food is made with love, whether it's my mother cooking Sunday dinner or us attempting pancakes on a lazy morning." The image made Jessica smile. A future home filled with warmth and laughter, perhaps children who would know both their grandparents and the value of simple pleasures. "I like that vision," she said, leaning into his embrace. "A lot." When they finally returned to the Winters mansion to share their news, they found both William and Rose waiting in the family room, attempting to look surprised when they saw the ring on Jessica's finger. "You knew," Jessica accused her father with a laugh. William tried to look innocent. "I may have been consulted about certain matters." "And you," James said to his mother. Is that why you insisted I take Grandma's ring when we visited last month? Rose smiled serenely. A mother knows when her son has found the right person to share his life with. I just helped with the timing. As congratulations and hugs were exchanged, Jessica felt a sense of completion, not an ending but a circle being formed. Rose, who had first nourished her body when grief had made eating impossible, would now become family in a different way. The nourishment had extended to her heart and soul, healing wounds she hadn't known how to address. Later, as Rose served her famous chocolate cake to celebrate the engagement, William raised his glass in a toast. To James and Jessica, he said, his voice full of emotion. May your life together be as rich and satisfying as Rose's cooking, simple in its honesty, complex in its depth, and always made with love. To love, Rose added, her eyes shining with maternal pride. In all its many flavors. As they clinked glasses, Jessica caught James's eye across the table, seeing in his smile the promise of a future built on the most essential ingredient of all, love that nourished body and soul alike. 1 year after James's proposal, the gardens of the Winters estate were transformed for a different kind of celebration. White chairs lined the expansive lawn, an elegant floral arch stood ready for the ceremony, and the air was filled with the delicious aromas coming from the catering tent where Rose personally oversaw the wedding feast preparations. Inside the mansion, Jessica sat at her mother's vanity table as the hairstylist put the finishing touches on her elegant updo. The wedding dress hanging nearby was simple but exquisite, a design she and Rose had selected together during a special trip to New York. In her hand, she held a small photograph of her mother, taken on Elizabeth's own wedding day. I wish you could be here, Mom, she whispered to the image. You would have loved today. A soft knock at the door interrupted her moment of reflection. Come in, she called, expecting her maid of honor. Instead, Rose entered, already dressed in her mother-of-the-groom ensemble, a flattering tea-length dress in deep teal that complemented her warm complexion. I hope I'm not intruding, Rose said, hesitating at the doorway. I wanted to check if you needed anything. Jessica smiled warmly, dismissing the hairstylist with a grateful nod. Never an intrusion. Come sit with me for a minute. Rose joined her at the vanity, noticing the photograph with understanding. She'd be so proud of you, Jessica. Not just today but every day. I think she would have liked you, Jessica said, setting down the photo. You both understood what truly matters in life. Rose smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Food and family. The rest is just details. Speaking of details, Jessica said, reaching for a small box on the vanity, I have something for you. A thank you isn't enough for everything you've done, but... She opened the box, revealing a delicate silver locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of Rose's late husband on one side and James on the other. Oh, Jessica, Rose breathed, touching the locket with trembling fingers. It's beautiful. I wanted you to have both the men you love close to your heart today, Jessica explained, helping Rose fasten the necklace. And I wanted you to know that I understand what a gift you've given me, not just James, but the example of what real love looks like in all its forms. Rose embraced her, careful not to disturb her hairdo. You are the daughter I never had, Jessica Winters. Today just makes it official. Another knock interrupted them, William this time, handsome in his formal attire. The guests are seated, he announced, then paused, taking in the emotional moment between the women. Everything all right in here? Perfect, Jessica assured him, standing to slip into her wedding dress. Rose was just helping me with some pre-wedding wisdom. William smiled knowingly. The kind that doesn't involve cooking tips, I presume. Some recipes are for life, not just dinner, Rose replied with a wink, excusing herself to make a final check on the reception preparations. As Rose left, William approached his daughter, emotion clear in his eyes. You look so much like your mother today. She would have loved all of this, especially seeing you so happy. Jessica hugged him carefully. I know, Dad. I feel her with us. She is, William agreed. In the foundation work we do, in the way you found love, in the family we're creating. He cleared his throat, collecting himself. Now let's not keep that fine young man waiting. I have it on good authority that he's been ready for an hour. The ceremony was everything Jessica had hoped for. Intimate despite the notable guest list, meaningful without being overly sentimental. James waited for her under the floral arch, his expression of awe and love as she walked down the aisle with her father making her heart swell. Their vows, written together over late-night conversations, spoke of building a life based on understanding, respect, and the kind of love that saw beyond surface appearances to the true essence of a person. When James slipped the wedding band alongside his grandmother's engagement ring, Jessica felt the completion of a circle that had begun that night in the kitchen when she first tasted Rose's soup. The reception that followed was a testament to Rose's culinary vision. Elegant without pretension, each dish telling a story of their journey together. The menu included refined versions of the comfort food that had first drawn Jessica back to life, James's childhood favorites, William's preferred dishes, and even a few Johnson family recipes that Rose had perfected over the years. Only my mother, James whispered to Jessica during the dinner, could create a wedding menu that manages to honor both our families while still being the best food anyone here has ever tasted. Jessica smiled, watching Rose move among the guests, accepting compliments with gracious modesty. In the years since James's proposal, Rose had transformed the Elizabeth Winters Culinary Academy into a renowned institution, her natural teaching abilities matching her cooking talent. She had found her true calling, not just in creating exquisite food, but in passing on her philosophy of cooking with love to a new generation. She's extraordinary, Jessica agreed. We're lucky to have her. James's gaze softened as he looked at his wife. I'm lucky to have you both. Two incredible women who see beyond appearances to what matters. The celebration continued into the evening with touching speeches from William and Rose, dancing under the stars, and moments of quiet joy amidst the festivity. Jessica was particularly moved to see her father dancing with Rose, their friendship having deepened into something important for both of them, not romance but a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. As the night drew to a close, Jessica and James prepared to leave for their honeymoon, a 3-week journey through the culinary capitals of Europe, where they would explore new flavors together while creating memories to last a lifetime. Before they departed, Rose pulled them both into a warm embrace. Remember, she said, her voice full of maternal wisdom, a marriage is like a good recipe. The ingredients matter, but it's the daily attention and love you put into it that makes it special. James kissed his mother's cheek. We'll remember, Mom. And we'll bring you spices from every city we visit. Just bring yourselves back safely, she replied, touching her new locket. That's all a mother needs. As their car pulled away from the mansion, guests waving sparklers in a beautiful send-off, Jessica leaned against her husband's shoulder. I was thinking, she said thoughtfully, about the day we first met, when Rose made that chicken soup in the middle of the night. James smiled at the memory. The soup that changed everything. Do you believe in fate? Jessica asked, watching the stars through the car window. That we were meant to find each other through your mother's cooking? James considered this, his arm tightening around her shoulders. I believe that love finds its way to those who are open to recognizing it, whether it's in a bowl of soup or across a crowded room. My mother always said that food made with love nourishes more than the body. She was right, Jessica murmured, thinking of all the ways her life had changed since that first midnight encounter in the kitchen. From a young woman unable to eat, trapped in grief, to someone capable of embracing life and love in all its complexity, the journey had begun with simple chicken soup made by hands that understood the healing power of care. As the car carried them toward their future together, Jessica felt a sense of completion and beginning all at once. Life would bring its challenges as it always did, but they would face them together, nourished by the love of family, strengthened by shared values, and always remembering that the simplest ingredients, when combined with genuine care, could create something truly extraordinary. In the years that followed, the story of the billionaire's daughter who rejected every famous chef's cuisine until she tasted the simple cooking of a housekeeping manager became something of a family legend, told at holiday gatherings, repeated to grandchildren, shared as evidence that true worth is found not in wealth or status but in authenticity and love. And in every family meal, whether prepared by Rose or by Jessica and James as they developed their own cooking skills, there was always that essential ingredient, the one that had brought them together, healed old wounds and created new bonds. Love, after all, was the flavor that made everything taste like home.